Hey everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of the Dan and Joe Sports Show. As always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Jeff.
All right, Joe, we're going to hit it off to start off with our locks of the week. And Joe, I'm calling this week the Get Right week. There's been a couple of teams, I think we're both going to name some, that had a little bit of rough weeks last week, one of which lost and one of which got a win, but in less than impressive factor. We're going to start there. My lock of the week, Joe, is for you to take Georgia on the points against Kentucky. We talked about in the last episode, Mississippi State and Alabama is not a rivalry. It's a conference game in which one team wins pretty much every time and usually in extremely convincing fashion. Everyone's all up on Kentucky this week. I think a lot of it is people just want Georgia to lose, right? Georgia's been at the mountaintop for almost 3 years now, and everyone sees some chinks in the armor and they're ready for it to be done. Well, Kentucky's not the team to do it, Joe. Kentucky and Georgia is an extremely one-sided rivalry. And every time people try to get like up on the Kentucky bandwagon, they're going to beat Georgia this year. Oh my God, they're so good on both lines of scrimmage. They can run the football, blah, blah, blah. The things that Kentucky are good at are the things that Georgia's good at defending. They don't match up well against them. They are taking on an angry Georgia team in Athens, which is a terrifying environment for a night game. I've been there for a night game before. The Georgia fans get after it. It's going to be a hungry Georgia team that's probably had a week where they have just gotten yelled at. They've had to run. They're in their minds like they're going to play their best game of the season this week. We saw Carson Beck really, I thought, show a lot in the fourth quarter of that Auburn game. They're going to feature Brock Bowers a whole lot. And there's no way that Ray Davis is going to sniff 200 yards against Georgia. I don't even think he's going to get 100. He might not even get 70, Joe. I think that you take Georgia, you lay the 14.5, and you see the dogs bark this weekend and flex and really just obliterate Kentucky and all of the ridiculous thoughts that people have that Kentucky could be the team that wins the SEC East this year.
No, I think that's a really good assessment because building off of that point, I feel like when you see these matchups with a team that's going up against a higher ranked, more, blue blood type program like a Georgia, while Kentucky has some players that stand out, good running back, some players that maybe stand out in skill positions, I think that it's easy to kind of forget about the depth of a Georgia in the recruiting class that they have, with their arsenal. Like you forget just for every, couple of players that Kentucky has, just kind of multiply that for Georgia.
Right. And Joe, here's a question I have. Here's a fundamental piece I think you have to beat Georgia. You got to have some really good wide receivers. You can't have one wide receiver. You got to have LSU wide receivers where you can throw Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas out there. You got to have Ohio State receivers, Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr., Florida State wide receivers with Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman. That's the level of wide receivers you have to have for me to think you have a chance against Georgia. I can't name a single Kentucky wide receiver right now.
Yeah, I mean, so you have an underwhelming wide receiver group. And so I don't think that the running game is going to be able to take over and play kind of ball control offense. And so I just think that it's not going to go well for Kentucky. I think this is a game where Georgia definitely flexes. And staying within that theme, the team maybe flexing and kind of bouncing back. You look at LSU, Dan, going on the road at Missouri. I think LSU is favored by 5.5. The last time I checked, I think look for LSU to cover this. I think that they'll cover it and then some. And really, LSU is executing so well offensively with all the talented players they have at receiver for Daniels to throw to. They have a solid running game, but even with 2 losses, I mean, let's not forget that LSU is not eliminated by any stretch of the imagination from the SEC West. Well, they could still win the West. And I wouldn't put that past them at all after what they did last year. And so, I'm sure that they could easily see Ole Miss slipping up, another time.
Yeah, that's a good point, Joe. I mean, I think that Brady Cook is a solid quarterback. He's shown me a lot. He had a really gutty performance against Kansas State when he played hurt at the end of the game and was able to lead them to get that improbable 61-yard field goal touch and had some really good passes for that win. I think he's been an upper tier quarterback in the SEC. Luther Burden is probably one of the top 5 wide receivers in the SEC. He's an absolute monster, and he'll be playing on Sundays. But when you get past that, there's not a whole lot else on the offense that really scares me. And their defense is serviceable, but they don't have an elite SEC defense. And I think unless you have an offense that you can trot out there that's like Ole Miss's offense, where you got a brilliant play caller in Lane Kiffin and all kinds of weapons, maybe not the kind of wide receiver weapons you've had in the past, but you pair some really solid wide receivers with good running backs like Judkins and Bentley. I don't think Missouri has that running attack where they can attack LSU in both manners. And if you don't have that elite defense, then you better have a really, really good offense to be able to beat this LSU team. And I just don't think they have it. Now, I think that they may be able to put up 30 points, but they're not going to stop LSU from putting up 45 plus.
Right. You just don't have the personnel to match LSU, and with it being an 11 a.m. kickoff. And I just think that that's not a good sign for Missouri. And I think that LSU will be able to I think Brian Kelly's shown so far in his LSU tenure that he knows how to bounce back there.
Absolutely. This is a get right weekend for LSU too. And I think if they flex, at least on the offensive side of the ball, and maybe the defense plays a little better than what you saw last week. And I think that's something that Brian Kelly can do. You talked about it, is he's so good at shutting out the noise. He's all about business. He can say, listen, guys, we have 2 losses, but the SEC is our dream. Last year, we made the SEC championship game. We had a chance at Georgia. Maybe we can get a second chance. And that's not off the table. Go out there and take care of business this week.
And do you think they're even officially eliminated from the playoff if they won the SEC?
That's a tough question, Joe, but I would say yes right now. If you look at where we're at right now, there are so many teams that are sitting there undefeated, and then a whole slew of really good teams right there that only have 1 loss. And I don't think this is the year where you can be a 2-loss team that makes the college football playoff, even with winning the SEC, because of where the SEC's at. Now, Auburn, the year that they had 2 losses and made that SEC championship game, that team was number 2 at that point, because there have been a lot of teams lose, and Auburn went back-to-back weeks beating the number 1 ranked team. Now, if LSU suddenly, if Alabama keeps doing what they've been doing and LSU beats them and then beats Georgia, maybe. But right now, I mean, you have USC, Oregon, Washington, Texas, Florida State, Notre Dame sitting there at 1 loss. You have all kinds of teams that are sitting there undefeated. I mean, shoot, you have teams like Maryland right now that are undefeated, and Louisville. I just think that it's probably going to be hard, but I mean, stranger things can happen, and we could still have things blow up. Oklahoma's still sitting there undefeated. I mean, there's all kinds of teams. So I just think that this is maybe not the right year for it, but we're only halfway through the season, so things could change.
Yes, no, I think that's well said, and I think you're probably right. It's very unlikely, but I think if you're Brian Kelly, to your point, you definitely want to, get the players motivated to win the SEC, and then honestly, since crazier things have happened, I think that it's still early on, maybe where you can convince everybody inside the building that there's still an outside chance, if you start winning. And LSU, of course, was the program with 2 losses with Les Miles, winning the national championship. So I guess it would be fitting if anybody did it, if it was them.
Absolutely. And I mean, they have the cachet to be able to do it. That they're one of the bluest of the blue blood programs. And if they can go out there and look impressive, then you still have to feel like the SEC championship is going to mean something, especially if they go out and they beat an undefeated Georgia. So I would say it's 95% that they're out of it, but you can use that 5% as a motivational ploy.
Mm-hmm. But it's still weird that that they have the 2 losses this early. Thanks to Ole Miss.
Yeah, it is very strange. But what they do last time they came back from the loss, they went out and obliterated Mississippi State 41-14 when people doubted them. So I look for a similar kind of effort this week.
Right.
All right, Joe. The biggest game of the weekend is for the Gold Hat, the Red River Rivalry. Maybe the most anticipated one we've had in quite some time. We've had Oklahoma be really good in recent years, many times in the Lincoln Raleigh. Texas has had There was one time when they had oh man, trying to name that quarterback that they had that was good, that was there for a while.
Sam Ellinger.
Sam Ellinger. There was one year with Sam Ellinger where Texas came into the game undefeated, had a little bit of hype, and ultimately, in just an amazing game, I think that I think Texas may have actually won that one. But other than that, it's always been, really for the longest time, Oklahoma has been the really good team. And yeah, Texas has come up and bit them in a couple of times. But really, the only team that's been really an elite team has been Oklahoma. We go into this game, we're both undefeated, but I look at Texas as being one of the most accomplished teams in America, playing a pretty rough schedule so far, going to Tuscaloosa, beating Alabama pretty badly, getting an impressive win, going to Baylor and taking on a Baylor team that had been drugged through the muck a little bit, but, in a really great home environment, and throttling Baylor. And then, they go out and they kill Kansas. They played some good teams. And meanwhile, Oklahoma's sitting there. They looked impressive against everybody they played. But the two kind of okay teams they played, Cincinnati, they beat them 20-6. SMU, that was a one-score game going into the fourth quarter. I think you're seeing a huge jump in year number 2 under Venables, like what I expected. The defense especially looks night and day different than last year. But they haven't shown me that they can play a team like Texas. And to be fair, I don't know that they would have had that opportunity.
Yeah, that's a good question. You have had Oklahoma has had, a lot of dominance in this series recently. I guess you could jokingly say that they're the thorn in the horn side at times. But I think at the end of the day, though, Texas feels like the better, more physical team heading into this matchup. It's kind of weird to think about it with the Lincoln Riley era that you kind of feel like Texas has a great chance to win this game. But when I look at Oklahoma, as good as Gabriel is, I feel like they don't have a great running game. I feel like they're more of a finesse offense. And I definitely feel that I have a lot more confidence in Texas's ability to run the football.
Yeah, if you're going to beat Texas this year, you got to play bully ball. You got to be able to run the football. You got to have a great offensive line. And you guys have a defensive line that'll get after the quarterback because Quinn Ewers will pick you apart if you give him time. And that's not easy. Alabama had 0 sacks against Texas. That's how good their offensive line is. And this is a series that has a lot of upsets in it, maybe more so than almost any rivalry I can think of, but not this kind of upset. Like, you'll see an upset when maybe Oklahoma's sitting there at 4-1 and Texas is 3-2, or, Texas is 5-0 and Oklahoma's 4-1. But this is one where, although they're both undefeated, I see Texas is a 14 to 17 point better team than Oklahoma, maybe worse than that.
Yeah, I could see that. The other, oftentimes unpredictable element I think about the rivalry is because it's played at a neutral stadium. You don't know sometimes what's going to happen. I feel like that's also probably allowed some upsets because, you don't have the home field advantage maybe sometimes for the favored team in their favor. And then also you add in kind of the 11 o'clock kickoff. I think that by nature, that makes it a little bit different too.
Yeah, this is a bucket list game for me. Every year I listen to different things talking about it, and you just hear more ridiculous fried things. I heard they have fried fireball shots now you can get at the Texas State Fair. There was something that it sounded so ridiculous that I would probably try it, but I believe it was like a chocolate bar that they covered with Fruity Pebbles and then fried and then put a syrup on top of it.
Like a Fruity Pebble, Cocoa Pebble combination.
Yes. And so, I just, I think I want to take all the stomach pills I need to and just go to this and just eat everything fried imaginable. I would like to try that experience.
Yeah, that would be pretty insane. It sounds like they have a lot of options there, and the fair is kind of that backdrop, or I guess you could say the football game's the backdrop within the fair.
Right. Well, see, for me, like, as someone who care less about who wins this game, I kind of like Oklahoma because my father-in-law is an Oklahoma fan. But I would like to go just for the fair experience, and the football thing is just gravy. I just get to see two iconic programs go against each other.
Right. Absolutely.
But yes, Joe, I think that this Texas team, I hesitate to say the Texas is back thing, but right now I believe they're back, and I think they're a college football playoff team right now.
I mean, I feel like at this point in the season, if they're not one of those favorites, I don't know who would be over them.
No, there are two teams right now who look extremely accomplished to me, who have shown to me they're college football playoff teams, and it's Texas and Florida State. Ohio State went to Notre Dame and got that win, but I'm not quite slotting them in the playoff yet. But I think Texas and Florida State are surefire playoff teams.
Yeah, I think they both have good chances.
All right, Joe. When Ole Miss plays Arkansas, it's anything but surefire. They've been the bane of Ole Miss's existence. Arkansas has never been a great SEC program. They've been middling for most of their time in the SEC. They've had two different times when they had, Darren McFadden and Felix Jones, and then one other time in the late 90s when they had Clint Sterner and some other good players where they made that SEC championship and they were, really good program. Other than that, they've kind of been between 5 to 10 wins, anywhere from that range, and it kind of like goes up and down. But one thing they've done is, man, they've beaten Ole Miss, and they've done it in just like brutal ways. Ole Miss has their best chance ever to make the SEC championship. The incredible, goofy 4th and 25 played to Alex Collins, God rest his soul. That ended the best chance that Ole Miss had to make that SEC championship game. And then you had the game last year, which really felt like the bottom point of the Lane Kiffin tenure. The Auburn noise was deafening. The fans and the players were upset with him. You could see that he kind of was going through the motions. And Arkansas just destroyed Ole Miss at home. And there's just been a lot of moments like that in this rivalry. And, Ole Miss beat them in a close game 2 years ago where Pittman chose to go for 2 and didn't get it. But for the most part, Arkansas has really kind of controlled this rivalry.
That they really have. It's definitely been a difficult game for Ole Miss. It's oftentimes kind of been a trap game where it kind of falls on the schedule, which is exactly what it's setting up to be this weekend, coming off of the dramatic LSU win, and then you got it, of course, before the bye week. And so you got to be very careful if you're Ole Miss. I think it also always makes this game tough because Arkansas travels well to Oxford because it's closer proximity to Fayetteville relative to other SEC teams. And so I think you'll always have a lot of Arkansas fans there. But at the end of the day, when I look at this particular matchup, even though you've got KJ Jefferson, you've got Sanders, I just don't think Arkansas has enough firepower to win this game in Oxford. I think that after last week's win, you're still going to see a lot of Ole Miss fans excited and showing up for a primetime SEC game. And I think that the line was at 11.5. I think that's probably about right for how I see this game playing out.
Yeah, Joe, I've been struggling in my mind with, does Ole Miss win this close, or do they win more in that 14 to 17 point range? And I really can't make up my mind. I don't know, but I do think they're going to win. And I think having the game at home, having it be at nighttime, getting another lit atmosphere is going to help a lot. And I think the offense has so much confidence. And one thing that I think we saw is that Arkansas is very vulnerable to the run game. So I look for Judkins and Bentley to really get going in this one, especially when you think about the fact that Ole Miss knows they need to protect their defense a little bit. You need to limit KJ Jefferson's opportunities. But I think that this is a game where Ole Miss just needs to get out fast, because I think if they can punch Arkansas in the mouth right off the bat, maybe get out 14-0, I think this Arkansas team has had such a bad season that they'll fold. But on the other hand, if Arkansas gets off early, this is going to be a 4-quarter game, and Arkansas could easily win it.
Yes. And so that's really concerning. You've got to start out fast if you're Ole Miss. You got to get some defensive stops, get the defense off the field, not let Jefferson and company get some confidence. And I think that especially coming off the win against LSU, you don't want to go out and have a lackluster performance and kind of hurt that momentum. Kind of like we were talking about with Florida earlier, they derailed their momentum from the Tennessee win.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what Ole Miss needs to do. Just win. I don't care how they win. Win 3-2. It doesn't matter. Just get the W, because Arkansas is that team that just plays you tight. They always play LSU tight. They win a lot of those. Ole Miss, they get up for those games, and so they're going to know this. But I think you use what you had last week, and what I want to see with Ole Miss this week is I want to see defensive improvement. I would love to see them hold Arkansas into the 20s. I think that would be a huge victory for Pete Golding's defense for them to do that.
Yes, yes. And finally, I think Ole Miss is fortunate this game is in Oxford. I think it'd be even more of a trap game if it was in Fayetteville, because Ole Miss has not won in Fayetteville since 2008. They beat Arkansas, I think, when we were in law school one time in the state of Arkansas, but that was in Little Rock. So they've not won in Fayetteville since 2008.
Yeah, Joe, I mean, in all honesty, if this game was in Fayetteville, I would still pick Arkansas to win. It's just it's at that point right now in terms of like the psychological.
It defies logic. It's like the mind game.
I mean, it's just like Tennessee going to Florida, the way it was for Auburn going to LSU. That's what it is for Ole Miss going to Arkansas right now.
Yeah, it really is.
All right, Joe, we got another very interesting road trip. And this is a game where, probably not getting a whole lot of national publicity, but I'm pretty fascinated that it pairs two undefeated teams. And you're saying, well, not getting a whole lot of national publicity and pairing undefeated teams. Which game are you talking about? I'm talking about Maryland and Taulia Tagovailoa traveling to Columbus, Ohio to take on Ohio State. Maryland is undefeated, and they've killed everybody. I mean, they may have put the nail in Tom Allen's coffin last weekend by beating Indiana, I think, 44-17. Taulia is putting up insane numbers. Joe, I heard that in the offseason, he was getting offered something like $5 million to leave Maryland and go to some of these other big programs, but he chose to stay at Terrapin. And right now, I mean, they're playing excellent football. They have to travel to Ohio State. And Ohio State, of course, they had their huge win over Notre Dame 2 weeks ago. They've had a little time to, come off of it. It's going to be an early kickoff, and this is an interesting game to me. Obviously Ohio State's got way more talent. They may not have the best quarterback in this game, so that gives Maryland a little bit of a chance. But in my mind, it's just I don't see how Maryland's going to be able to stop Ohio State on offense. That's the biggest problem I see.
Mm-hmm. I can see that. I think Maryland will have their moments offensively, but you're right. I think Ohio State will assert their will throughout the game at some point, like where you see maybe the first quarter's close, the first half's close. But I just think over time, just the depth of Ohio State, we're talking about earlier, the Georgia versus Kentucky element. I was talking about the depth of a program like Georgia, similar with Ohio State, with all those 5-star and 4-star recruits. I think over time, as the game plays out, that makes a difference, kind of creates that separation.
I think that this game's got a huge line. It's 20.5 Ohio State. If I were to tell you to bet on this, I think I would say take Maryland. I think Maryland's going to hang a little bit tighter than that. I think that Taulia is going to have some success against Jim Knowles' defense, but they've really improved a lot on the defensive side in Ohio State, just like what we'd expect with Jim Knowles. I mean, Jim Knowles is an excellent defensive coordinator. Look at what's happened to Oklahoma State since he left. Oklahoma State was a perennial top 15 team every year that Jim Knowles was there. Now they're getting drubbed by South Alabama at home. I mean, he's an incredible defensive coordinator. And Ohio State won that game. Yes, they got the touchdown in the last second to beat Notre Dame, but don't kid yourself. Their defense won that football game. And that's what I think is going to happen. I think Taulia may have a couple of drives, but Jim Knowles will get it straight. And I look for the strength of Ohio State's defense to get them the win, because we know their offense is going to do the job against the Maryland defense.
Right, and that's a good point about Ohio State's defense with how they looked against Notre Dame.
Yeah. Joe, speaking of defense, you're going to have a lot of it in this game. You may not watch it, and frankly, I would kind of judge you if you did watch it, and you probably have problems with yourself if you watch it. But Purdue going to Iowa. Joe, I see this as a big upset opportunity. Iowa right now, they've only lost one game. They've only lost to Penn State, but it was brutal the way they lost, 31-0. Purdue's been kind of coming on a little bit. They beat up on Illinois last week. Purdue's known as the spoiler makers because they get a lot of upsets. Iowa right now is kind of the laughing stock of college football. I mean, you and I have been joking about it before the show. The AI Brian Ferentz, like they're everywhere. These little fake videos of him, talking about the Ohio State, talking about the Penn State loss, where he says, well, the defense had 97 plays and they didn't put any touchdowns either. That was a team loss, and the team is responsible for scoring points. And then, of course, it was the one earlier where they scored 41 points, and he basically told the press to get a ladder to climb out of his, And it's just funny, but that's how bad their offense is. That Brian Ferentz has become a laughing stock in America.
Yeah, I mean, that's been kind of the story all year is how his offense is looking, and that's not a good sign for a team if a story like that is kind of your lead.
No, I mean, and I saw something too where this was definitely computer generated. But the big thing with Iowa is the cancer children wave. I mean, they have the cancer hospital, the children's cancer hospital that overlooks the Iowa football stadium. And the fourth quarter, it's really amazing. All the children that are afflicted with that will wave at the fans, and the fans turn back and wave at them. Somebody computer generated something in the windows of the cancer hospital saying "Fire Brian Ferentz," and it looked pretty real. I mean, it's gotten to a huge, it's gotten to a blowing off point right now. And so I think that they're kind of due to get upset by somebody. And their offense is not going to figure it out. Cade McNamara got hurt last week, which, Cade McNamara wasn't an excellent player, but he was a solid game manager. And now you've lost the guy that you had to go out and get from Michigan, who still wasn't making your offense run that good. And I think this is a dangerous spot for Iowa. And it's Kirk Ferentz's son. He's got about the most steady contract next to Jimbo Fisher in all of college football. But I don't know. I mean, it may get to the point where the noise is so deafening that maybe Brian Ferentz just chooses to get out on his own.
It may reach that point. I think that it definitely creates an awkward situation, and a game that otherwise would have very little interest. It does make it compelling for that reason.
Well, I mean, Joe, have you ever heard of an offensive coordinator having a set amount of points that he has to get and then making it public and it blasts everywhere? This drive to 325, the quest of Brian Ferentz to score 325 points, which, by the way, not only includes his offense scoring points, they include defensive touchdowns and special teams touchdowns. It's just crazy to me that they put that out there, and it's made him even more of a laughing stock.
No, it really has. I don't know who is in their PR program. That's definitely a big question for me. But additionally, to I think your greater point, I just cannot believe it's public.
Yeah, I mean that's just bad, and that's not something that you ever should put out there. But now, every week, people are like, "Oh, he's 9 points off the 325 drive," And if that happens and they're still below this level and they lose to Purdue, then it's going to be a rough week in Iowa City.
Yes, it really will be.
All right, Joe, kind of another game that is a little bit under the radar, but also interests me is Notre Dame at Louisville. Louisville went out in the offseason and made one of the best coaching hires there was. And I think for them, they probably did hire the single best head coach they could have gotten in Jeff Brom. Jeff Brom was a great quarterback at Louisville back in the early 2000s. I remember watching him. He was extremely good. And what he did at Purdue was just mind-blowing. I mean, he took Purdue to, I think, 2 Big Ten championship games and really just overperformed with a lot of, lacking talent. Louisville's a team that's had a lot of really talented players. I mean, we think of, Lamar Jackson winning a Heisman Trophy. They've had some good defensive players, Elvis Dumervil. There's a lot of talent that's there, and they're undefeated in this first season. They've had to gut out some victories. They haven't quite done it the way you would expect with really good offensive play. It's been more defensive. This is a scary road trip for Notre Dame. I still like Notre Dame to win. I think that they got a lot of confidence by winning the way they did last weekend against Duke in an equally exciting atmosphere. This one's maybe a little shade below it, but I do think this is going to be a close game.
Yeah, I can see it. I think that it's a close game too by virtue of not only being at Louisville, but just Notre Dame having the grind of 3 straight games, that are pretty difficult, especially, having 2 straight road games and coming off the cusp of the emotional loss to Ohio State.
That's right. This is kind of a dream season for Louisville, but the real dream season is for America's underdog. And right now, that's the Washington State Cougars. Their flag flies at every single ESPN game day, despite being made fun of by the my opinion the lamest addition to the ESPN College Game Day crew. But Washington State is just playing great right now. They beat a really good Oregon State team, had a huge lead. Yet again, they looked good last week. They're playing UCLA on the road right now, and they're an underdog. And Joe, we all know that the home field advantage that UCLA has may be the worst in all of Power 5 football. I think that a UCLA fan is a mythological creature. I've never met someone that's like, I'm a UCLA fan, because they don't care about football. They've got a solid football program. They've got a great coach right now, and even with that, they're still not going to games. So I think this is the fact that it's at UCLA does nothing for me in this game. I think Washington State wins this game.
Who was it? The Atlanta Falcons that would pipe in or were accused of piping in like crowd volume at one point in their stadium. And really, thinking about Ferentz, maybe UCLA would be better off with some AI fans in the stands.
That's it. They just need to get a bunch of Brian Ferentz AIs to show up in the stands.
They should. But yeah, I think that in all seriousness, Washington State has a good chance to win this game, and Cam Ward has yet to throw an interception this year. And I think that he'll probably continue that and have a good performance here against UCLA.
Yeah, a lot of other teams are mad that they didn't take the chance on the really excellent quarterback from Incarnate Word, who was an FCS player. But Washington State went out and got it, and them and Jake Dicker. And he's been excellent for him for the last 2 years, really good this season, and in a league that's full of so many top-notch quarterbacks, Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., DJ Uiagalelei. He's really, Cam Ward's looking like, he's right up there with the best of the bunch right now. And this Washington State team is just playing incredible. And with everything that's happened in the Pac-12, I think they're kind of America's underground darling this season.
I think so, for all those reasons.
And Joe, on the other side of it, the other America's darling, Oregon State Beavers, the other one that's getting relegated, they had an impressive win against Utah last week, beat them 21-7. Their defense absolutely shut down a Cam Rising-less Utah team. And they're traveling on the road to Cal. And this is a fascinating game to me because Oregon State should win this game. They've got a great defense. They've got a quarterback that's not making a lot of mistakes, a solid run game. But I watched Auburn struggle mightily at Cal. They have a very good defense. Jaden Ott is probably a top 5 running back in America. This is going to be a really close game. And I consider this a little bit of a trap game for Oregon State. And I think I'm going to put, as much as I want Oregon State to win, I think I'm going to predict the upset in this. I think the Cal gets this one done.
It's definitely a concerning setup if you're Oregon State. I think they'll pull it out, but I think that their style of play makes it tough sometimes, because when you're a team that plays a little more ball control, maybe you run the football a little bit more, your quarterback can still throw from time to time, but you're maybe a little more cautious compared to some offenses in the modern era. I think that one thing that happens in those scenarios that's a little bit underrated is that you limit your possessions, you limit your opportunities. And so I can see a situation where Oregon State really just does not have the ball as much throughout the game, or as many drives. And so let's say that they have a drive that stalls and they have to settle for a field goal. You start watching things like that, that can come back to bite them against California, who has a really good defense.
Yeah, I think so. We always talk about the Pac-12 starts cannibalizing itself. I think this is going to be one of the first instances of that.
I can see it.
All right, Joe, speaking of cannibalizing itself, the Saints defense right now wants to eat the Saints offense because it's just so pathetic. Joe, the Saints are really wasting a Super Bowl level defense. I know that Derek Carr got injured, but maybe they shouldn't have played him at all, because they had dink and dunk passes all game long. They weren't trying to stretch the field at all, and they just lost the Bucs for the first time ever 3 times in a row. And they let Baker Mayfield beat them, and that was an embarrassing loss for the Saints last weekend.
It really was tough, Dan. You worry about where this team's going to go as far as avoiding a free fall, because you've got a tough road game this week at New England. It's a tough place, even though they're not as good. I mean, that's still like a cross country trip and always a tough place to win at. And so I think that I was very discouraged by what I saw against the Buccaneers, because you would think that the Saints could at least run the ball. You would think that, their screen game could be pretty good. That was something they were always good at in the Sean Payton, Drew Brees era. But I really felt like Derek Carr with this offense was going to be able to air it out a little bit more and throw the ball downfield. And we even saw the first 2 weeks when Carr was healthy, we didn't see a whole lot of that.
Yeah. They haven't utilized Carr the way that I thought they would. He was not my first pick when there was all these free agent quarterbacks out there. I was okay with it when they got it, but I definitely expected more than what I'm seeing right now.
Yes, because like you said, you're wasting a Super Bowl caliber defense, and if you're not going to compete this year, I don't know when you are. Like, you almost will probably be in rebuild if you have another year that's wasted, because you look around the NFC and you're 2-2, and you're slowly kind of behind the 8 ball in the division, and you've got teams like the Eagles, Cowboys, the 49ers. They're just getting better and better.
Exactly, Joe. And I mean, you look right now that this defense that you have, your best players are all getting a little long in the tooth. Cam Jordan doesn't have many years left in him. Demario Davis doesn't have many years left with him. Marcus Lattimore does have a lot with him, but you're going to have to pay him a lot. And so, this defense has got a shelf life. It's got maybe about 2 more years where it can be at this level. You have to take advantage of it, and you have to take advantage of it now.
Absolutely.
Joe, just like what you have to take advantage of right now is the NFL and Taylor Swift. It's a beautiful marriage. The Chiefs played the lowly Jets, and I think it was the highest rated regular season game ever in the NFL. Joe, would you say that right now Taylor Swift is the most famous person walking planet Earth?
I think so. I think a few years ago I would have said somebody like Barack Obama, but with him not being president, with somebody like Taylor Swift constantly in the limelight, and then adding to it with this story, I think it has to be her right now.
I mean, she is so famous, Joe, that Travis Kelce, he was a famous NFL player, probably a top 7, 8 famous NFL player, has been in quadruple the commercials I've ever seen him in just in the last 2 weeks since it became public they were dating. I mean, I've never seen anything like this. And I mean, I like Taylor Swift, but I'm not going to pay $1,000 to see a concert of hers, like some people. But this love affair with her is something. I mean, I don't even know if I remember Britney Spears being this popular.
It's insane to me. I told my dad recently that her rise to stardom is sort of like a Tom Brady story for me, because I never would have expected it. I remember when I was in high school, she was starting to get famous with country music. But if you had told me back then that she had been kind of a one-hit wonder, had a few songs that people liked, and then kind of disappeared, I would have believed it. And for her to be this good so long and to rise to this level of stardom and to increase her popularity clearly into popular music in addition to country, I never saw that coming.
Absolutely. You can put a blank space and put her name next to the Chiefs' next Super Bowl. You can catch all of our old episodes on Spotify, and of course, subscribe to us on YouTube, the Dan Joe Sports Show YouTube channel. And as always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.